Hello and welcome to a buildingSMART webinar. This webinar is hosted by the buildingSMART Regulatory Room and is the first in a series of open house sessions planned to occur in between the biannual buildingSMART summits. Thank you for joining. My name is Dan Little and I will be your moderator today. Today's webinar is titled The Role of Open Standards for Regulators. Our speakers are Nicholas Nisbet, Director at AEC3 Limited, and Franco Coyne, Digital Project Manager at DBA Group. This webinar is scheduled to last 1 to 1.5 hours with a Q&A at the end. We will also be taking questions throughout. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available in due course. Before I hand over to our speakers, I would like to bring your attention to that buildingSMART is committed to ensuring that participation in the development of standards is unrestricted and the process for their adoption is transparent, and standards that are developed do not favour any particular provider and are open, non-binding and accessible to all. Please take note of our code of conduct on the screen now. With that, I would like to hand over to Nick to start the presentation. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Dan.
And I will release the screen share for you.
Okay. Yes, indeed. Welcome to this webinar put on by the buildingSMART Regulatory Room. We intend this to be the first of, as Dan said, a series of open houses where we can reach out and explain the work of buildingSMART, of the Regulatory Room, and the case that we're making. Today, just find my controls. Right. Okay. I will be joined by Franco Coyne, and between us, we would like to make some points about open standards, about buildingSMART, and how the Regulatory Room is contributing. We'd also like to share with you some of our thoughts about how the case for regulatory engagement is being made and where we think it may be heading. We very much hope that you will contribute by using the Q&A facility. At the end, we would like to ask some questions of you and to respond to any other points that you may want to make. So given the limitations of webinars, we hope to make this as open and friendly as possible. Okay. The agenda will, if I may, is to introduce open standards and buildingSMART, then talk about what the Regulatory Room does and what the challenge for what the regulatory challenge is. We'll have some questions for you, and then we very much welcome questions from you. I hope you will stay to discuss some next steps and getting involved if what you hear is of interest. Okay. So the role of open standards for regulators. What is an open standard? Where do they come from and how are they made? What can they do? And perhaps most crucially, how good are they? So to start, our definition of open is focused around open BIM, which is about extending the benefits of building information modeling by improving the accessibility and usability, management and sustainability of digital data in our industry. So Open BIM is trying to ensure that interoperability is available, so the information can exist independently of the applications that author it, and it can exist independently of what tools we might want to view it or analyze it, and so on. These standards should be open and accessible to all, as widely as possible, and should be used to create reliable data exchanges, so that they can replace conventional paper-based or document-based exchanges. We're looking to use those open standards for collaboration. The idea that information can be presented in a form that helps us do our work and helps others to do our work. And from that, create the flexibility so that people can choose the technology that they want to use, and that technology can evolve according to demand. And lastly, a key point about open standards and open BIM is that we can safeguard sustainability. And underlying any other ideas of sustainability, whether they are economic or environmental or social, is the need for information sustainability, that information is created with an idea that others might be using it now or in the future. So we have a program of work to try and create those open standards and to present them and to develop them to the industry. The organization that is leading that response to that demand is the buildingSMART organization. It's heading for almost 30 years old, not quite, 25 perhaps, and is committed to enabling the full benefits from digital ways of working in the built asset industry. Our span of consideration includes buildings and infrastructure and managed environments outside. So we don't draw any limits, and we want to span across the entire life cycle, both the project life cycle and the asset life cycle, seeing as the sustainability requires continuity across all those things. buildingSMART is a open, neutral, not-for-profit organization. It is international. Its composition is both chapters drawn from around the world, and also with organizations that have signed up for a global involvement. But it is open through its processes to as many aspects of our industry as possible. One of the key ways that buildingSMART operates is through the idea of a room. And there are 8 examples listed there, of which the regulatory room is one, and it's one that I lead, and Franco is a loyal and strong colleague of mine. But each of these rooms invites its community to get involved, to discuss the problems and the issues that are arising in their aspect of the industry. There are lots of crossovers between the rooms, I'm pleased to say. And in essence, the role of the rooms is to consider the state of the standards and the interoperability and the sustainability from these different points of view, and where necessary, develop or recommend the development or extension of the standards that we have. So the airport room is obviously attracts a lot of facility operators, as well as those designing and constructing. The building room is probably the oldest room, and is now has strong links between design, construction, and facilities management. The construction room is currently looking at aspects of information on site as a particular issue to make sure that the quality of the information that's created actually impacts the construction process. The infrastructure and railway rooms have worked together to create the latest release of IFC, which extends the scope of the IFC firmly into the areas of road, rail, ports and harbours, and other facilities, with tunnels coming along soon. We'll explain more about the regulatory room as we go through, but there's also a technical room for those people who wish to influence the form of the standards and how they're made available. So, for example, looking at extra standards that might be needed to join or improve the way CDEs work together, common data environments work together. Product room, very engaged with the supply chain, looking at the issues around classification and the delivery of and sharing of information, and so on. So the regulatory room, to come back to that, is intent on looking at how BIM can improve the demand side of the industry. Regulators demand certain compliances. We're also interested in customer requirements, client requirements, and so on and so forth, and also those things that come from other organizations like insurance and other third parties, and how those recommendations can be handled. I'd like now to ask Franco to talk about the survey work we've been doing.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. Okay, so more or less 1 year ago, we started to ask ourselves in the regulatory room to talk about the role of open standards for regulators. That is the same title of open house event today. And so at the end, we reached the answer that the best way to know this is to ask to the ecosystem what they think about. And so we launched this survey, and actually answered the people from 38 countries, more or less the same number of countries that are attending to this open house. And we launched this survey in 5 languages, and we have 160 participants. And one of the most interesting thing was 36% of them were not directly involved in regulatory. So this means that the topic is quite interesting, even if you are not a specialist in this area. And more than 18% of the participants were coming from regulatory bodies, and this is another interesting part of this survey to understand what is the interest about this topic. Next one, next please. Okay, so first of let's talk about where the people that is interested in our ecosystem in which people is interested in BIM and regulatory open standards and regulatories. As I already said that we had 18% of institutions, of people from institutions. That's very good for us, because more or less the same percentage of people that is working in this area totally in the ecosystem. And of course, we saw that the most interested people are coming from companies that were involved in engineering, architecture, construction, and advice and services. A little bit less from information technology, and not so great interest from real estate and products. That means probably they are not still involved in, they're not hearing the wave that is coming on on this topic on regulatory and BIM. Next, please. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Hey, there we go. Right.
Okay. Great. Okay. The first thing that we learned is that even though only 45% of people were directly involved in 75% of our panel say that they are somehow involved in BIM and regulatory, because if it's not already there, it's coming. But and another very interesting stuff we learned during the survey. Next, please. Is that in that 43% of people actually involved in open BIM, so open standards are actually the main standard used, and especially during the last 12 months activities that were run for a government, a regulatory, a permitting in building environment. Next, please. So we did also some a little bit tricky questions. One is we asked to people what they think. We asked to our attendants what they think about the awareness of BIM in the regulatory. What they think is the awareness in the regulatory bodies, and they agreed that is more or less low, while is medium to low in regulated industries. Great stuff is that you can see on the right-hand side of the screen is that this opinion is completely shared. So two parts thinks alike. Honestly, probably the regulatory bodies thinks that the regulators think that the industry is more aware of open BIM that regulated industry itself and think about itself. Okay, next one I think is going to Nick now.
Okay, so clearly there is a rising expectation, some of it tentative steps. One of the things that the regulatory room has done is to identify a roadmap for how regulators can progressively adopt the open standards. But before we mention those in more detail, what is the regulatory problem? Is it worldwide? And what would be good? Let's summarize the regulatory problem. This is just drawn on our experiences of engaging around the world. There are considerable commercial, legal, and financial pressures on regulators. And like many activities and many organizations, they are having difficulty in getting and retaining the expertise that they need and the financial and other resources. One key thing about the regulatory problem is that there is tension between the desk-based and the site-based duties. And many regulators believe that their job should be out on site, making sure that the real world is as it should be. And of course, others believe that or feel that if the designs can be got right first, then the outcomes will be better. But for the desk-based problems, the office-based problems, there is a problem of workload and fluctuations in workload. In many economies, the construction sector is subject to very broad fluctuations. And of course, if there are government mega projects, then suddenly the workload can accelerate very rapidly. There is a common problem of checking for the completeness of submissions, that much of the delay and frustrations of the process is that it can take considerable length of time before it emerges that a submission for regulatory approval is in some way incomplete, and then you end up chasing and ending up with an inconsistent submission because some of it has been submitted later. And of course, there may be thousands of pages of regulations for different, for some facility and building types. And that volume of regulations is not stable. Most regulations seem to be revised in some form or other every 3 years, perhaps with only 6 months or a few months notice of those changes. So the desk-based problem is very hard, and under those pressures, it's clear that it's possible for shortcuts to develop or things to be missed. On the site-based problems, the challenge is having useful and consistent information to check the site work against. And it can be a challenge to use conventional documentation to compare against the construction site that's presenting itself. And with conventional documentation, there's very few opportunities to filter the information or to visualize what the construction site should look at a particular point in time. And of course, even during construction processes, there are variations being created and issues that need to be tracked as the information is refined, maybe by subcontractors' submissions and so on and so forth. So as an information problem, there is a real challenge for regulators. And of course, their work is, going back to my first point, it is challenging in terms of the legal and commercial and financial pressures, because the successful regulation can be critical to life safety and the social goods social interests that the regulator is representing. It's also a key economic issue, and here I'm drawing on a World Bank report. It's a periodical report on the attractiveness of different countries for business investment. And when they do these studies, they take the example of, the study as a whole considers tax regimes and all sorts of things. But a specific aspect of it is the ease with which a warehouse might be constructed. And as a key contributor to the attractiveness of a location. And I've pulled out 6 countries from the tables that are produced. They are the countries that are currently represented on the steering committee of the regulatory room. just as examples. And you can see that the attractiveness is scored depending on 4 aspects. The number of different procedures that have to be gone through, the time in days that it might typically take to get the permissions and approvals, a cost measured in relation to the cost of the warehouse building, and there's also an assessment on the control of quality, how good the regulatory environment, how strong or effective the regulatory environment is. And you can see that the number of procedures across all the 120 countries ranges from 7 up to 26. And in this case, it happens that the United Kingdom has a relatively low number of procedures. You can see that the time in days to get these permits, which would typically include planning and technical permits and occupation permits, it can vary between 28 days and a maximum of 652. Now, I don't know which country that is. It's probably not clear. But you can see that the Korean Republic is actually the best. I think that the variation in the number of days it can take is a significant issue which the deployment of open standards should be able to address by reducing the amount of rework and improving the efficiency of the assessments. The cost factor also varied widely, but not too much in terms of the 6 countries that are currently represented. Clearly, an environment where 76% of an additional 76% over the cost of the construction would be a challenging environment to work in. And then there's an assessment of the quality of the regulatory system, and Canada and the Russian Federation have scored almost the highest there. And I'm ashamed to say that the United Kingdom did a lot less well. So the quality of the regulatory system and its efficiency is a key ingredient in the attractiveness for worldwide business. Of course, that's not the only criteria, but it is revealing to see these different numbers and to understand how where improvement could be achieved. So, Franco, should we be excited or worried?
Haha. Okay. Nick, you talk about some evidence we have from the market, from our discussion, but we also started to make some questions about perception in our survey. And what we found is that people that you see on the left-hand side of the screen, there is the peak of the hill is in the sunny side. So most of the attendants, the people that answered to our survey, consider are almost happy that the digital will become the main way for permitting in the built environment, even though some issues are still there. And BIM attitude, the regulatory body looks a little more confident than industry in introducing open BIM regulatory, and this is another good approach to this topic, because I think that the regulatory bodies should be the real driver for this process, the global driver for this process. Next, please. And what about worries? Which kind of perceived worries are not technical? Only 25% of the attendants said that there is some worries about the technical issues, while complexity and all the stuff that are related to complexity, like business reorganization and cost of BIM adoption, are absolutely the most intense worry perceived by our in our ecosystem. Next, please. Nick.
Yeah.
Next, please. Sorry.
You know, it's there we go. Sorry.
Okay, and now who is more positive or negative on being regulatory? Technical from both sides in regulatory bodies and the regulated industries are birds of a feather, so they are supporting this change strongly, while stakeholders looks less confident about this change. So next, please. If we try to understand who is the person we should point to support our process in fostering the using of BIM in regulatory, we found some young person, 31 to 35, with a background in architecture, engineering, and or construction, with a technical to project oriented attitude. That make me very sad because I'm 63 and I'm a chemist of 63, and so I don't look like a real open BIM champion. But by the way, this was just a joke. Let's go to the next one, Nick. I think we're going to talk something about survey outcomes, and just to say, we find that there is a good foundation for the future of open standards for regulatory. Absolutely, we think that the answer was better than we expected, honestly. But the other question is why we're still not at the happy end. That's something that we are going to ask you, to ask ourselves, and to help to ask your help for solving this during this session. Okay, Nick, up to you now.
Yeah. So we'd like to ask you some questions. We're conscious that there are both regulators and regulated people in the audience. And I would, first of all, like to stress that we are all agents for change. And particularly when we start talking about open standards and collaboration, someone has to do that championing. And that will often involve educating the people around us. I think many designers, engineers, and contractors have found themselves educating their supply chains. Sometimes clients find themselves either being educated or having to be educated on the opportunities around collaborative BIM. So the questions for you, in whatever role you might be, are: what would be good? It may be that people feel that the current system is as good as it can be. Others may feel that that a hybrid system might be necessary for a while. And some countries are working very hard to go towards a totally data-driven system. So what would be what would good look like is a key question. I think another question is to think about, are any of the long-term issues that I highlighted going to get better? Or how are they going to get better? Or are we stuck with a situation where the regulators will lag behind the industry that they regulate? So very interested to see your comments in the Q&A. to think about how we can break the bubble and make open standards a general topic. And if you know how to overcome the fear of the open BIM complexity. Is it complex or is it just different? And have you made any small steps towards using interoperable information with your regulatory contacts, and is it perceived as doable? We have a situation where, as Franco has shown, that many people believe this is good or potentially good, but that doesn't mean there isn't reluctance for the stakeholders to make the steps necessary. So there's I'm delighted that we have an audience potentially around well over 100, but we'd really like to see some of your comments into the chat so that Franco and I can comment on them, and if there are any points that you feel we should have covered, then we'll deal with that. So just I hope everyone listening will at least make some sort of a comment on where we are. The discussion, maybe we should hold it there, and then we'll just see if anything is coming through.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
Last is just one idea we had about what to do, but is of course just a starting point for regulatory room and building smart. Yeah. I hope that someone will focus on the document management, on the question if open standards are, or digitalization of regulatory is just a document management problem. I don't think so. Of course, we don't think so. But many times we find people, especially organizations that are just thinking it works this way. And on the other side, let me just say one thing about some global trends in economics. The area that is we are discussing about, that is the one about regulatory for digitalization and regulatory, is called sometimes RegTech, and is reported as one of the most growing aspects in the digital business. And just to say some number, just to report a number, it was before the pandemics. The growth was supposed from 5 billion dollars a year to in 2019 to 25 billion euros in 2025. This year, because of the pandemics and the feeling of people about the change that as a report is needed in digitalization, this outlook moved from 25 to 36 billion euros in 2025. So this is a great change, a great momentum for this process. A lot of industries are moving their regulatory to be completely digitalized, and I think this is a good point of view to start talking, because it means that probably we don't see that, but the digital business is looking at us, is watching us.
Sorry, Franco, if I can just interrupt there. We've had a question come in, if that's all right.
Yeah, perfect.
So it's from Frank Doherty. He did say, don't get me wrong, he's enthused about open standards, but his question is, How achievable is this when it is still a minority of construction contractors who are BIM invested, and when subcontractors will be less likely to be financially invested in digital technology?
Yeah, I think the adoption of BIM is driven by many things, and there are individual advantages for designers and engineers, and for contractors, and for FM, for building operators to adopt BIM. We're very much aware that there's huge gains if it's done across those sectors, so that there are all the extra benefits that one can get from collaborative BIM. I think the incentives could include that if one engaged with a regulatory system that was using Open BIM, then those results would be more accurate and more efficient and available much more quickly. And in some cases around the world, the results are available freely, so that even before application, you know what the outcome is going to be. So the real question is there an economic advantage for the client in the regulatory system, one, not being a bottleneck, and two, giving a higher level of assurance about the quality or acceptability, at least, of the design. So I think there are lots of reasons for people to continue to adopt BIM. And I think that the role of subcontractors and suppliers and so on is getting clearer and clearer, and it doesn't necessarily require them to invest in the high-end BIM tools. So I think we're moving towards a situation where it would be attractive. Now, there may be we may be able to think of some projects that will never be done using BIM. The domestic house extension might be an example, although mine was done in BIM, so I'm an exception. So I think it lots of things moving forward, and the advantages of a BIM-based process can be considerable. I know a housing developer in the UK who engaged with architects who were fully committed to BIM for site layout and for house type development. And with that level of confidence, they were able to go for planning permission and building regulatory control and letting the first contracts on the same date. And so completely changing the timescales and the economics of the development case. So I think there are incentives potentially there. And so the more BIM that is used, the more attractive the regulatory idea will be. Equally, the more attractive the regulatory idea is, the more use of BIM there will be.
We've actually had a couple of follow-on questions as well, Nick, if you're okay to continue on this theme.
Yeah.
Yep. So Yurko has said, I'm not sure there's a question here, but I'll read out the comment anyway. There's an interesting issue with scale in our experience. Our first pilot scheme worked really well at a small scale. Scaling it up to a national scale, for instance, requires a different technical approach as well as cost implications related to processing more data. And then there is a question here from Douglas. Is there a UK municipality implementing digital building permit with BIM? We've seen more initiatives in other European countries.
There were, let me take the UK first.
Yeah.
There have been some pilots in automating some of the planning and zoning rules in 4 or 5 or a handful of municipalities. And some lessons were learned about the cost model of that exercise, that digitizing one clause of a regulation was a very expensive thing to do compared with digitizing the full set. We have an initiative called DCOM, Digital Compliance, in the UK, and that reported 2 years ago that automated digital compliance would be feasible and available in 5 years if we started. And that was immediately converted into funding for a first round of demonstration projects, which will announce will finish next year, and will show that the automation is possible and economic. And that will be a major landmark, because unlike some of the efforts in Europe, we're trying to get towards a no-code solution, so that we are not employing programmers in the project. And so we're trying to get the scalability, because I agree with the comment that scalability is a challenge. I think many students and practitioners have made small tools that will check one aspect or one aspect of an aspect or something, and for it to be scaled up, we have to go for management solutions rather than technical solutions to handle the workflow, to handle the scope effectively.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nick. There were some more comments and questions. Did you want to add anything first, Franco?
Yeah, just to tell the story of what's going on in Italy. We have a national decree that is forcing us to use open standards in public buildings, in new public buildings into 2025. And it works. So the problem is that when you add something from a national point of view, effectively the infrastructure's issues become so evident, and sometimes so they look so not it's not possible to overcome them. But anyway, things are moving slowly. And usually, and as I said before, pandemic is accelerating a lot of stuff in digitalizations. Anyway, the problem is here, and still it's not solved actually. And now the stuff is I don't know if we were talking with with another member of the regulatory room steering committee about Japan just this morning, and he was saying that even there they have a even stronger goal to go to digital permitting into 2023, or to use standards for into 2023, and they still having this kind of issues. Anyway, this position of governments are, in my opinion, very important, because they force the market to start thinking. Of course, these kind of calls probably are too strict. It's not possible to do this in such a short time, but they are essential for driving also finance, the economic problems to infrastructure and models.
And Tomi Heitinen from Finland has made the point that in Finland, BIM is synonymous with the open standards and especially IFC. So they start from a stronger position than those countries that have focused on proprietary information development. So that's interesting. Yeah, so there's a point being, I've got the chat now, you can see it.
There was a follow-on from
Ask
Frank as
Tommy.
well, Nick.
Yeah, so that's great. I mean, yes, sorry, there's a point being made from Scotland, which is slightly different from the United Kingdom in so many ways, but it's a different, yeah, they have a different research path there. And I think it's government has to get its act together. Now, for some of the early steps of the roadmap, I don't think it need be a big deal. So first step of accepting open standard information as supporting information, as background information to help the regulator. You know, IFC viewers are commonplace now, and then one could start to move to shift over. What the UK government has funded in the DCOM initiative is moving towards full automated compliance checking of all, well, I'm going to say all the major building regulations by a certain, by a certain date. The pilots are doing all of 3 regulations, parts B, L, and M, which is fire, energy conservation, and accessibility. So there is a very clear intent to move towards 100% coverage.
Thank you, Nick. We've got quite a lengthy comment from Masaki, and Franco said it might be an idea to allow him to relay it in person. Masaki, I'm going to allow you to talk now. If you're okay to talk, please do so. You should be able to unmute if you're happy to talk.
Hello.
Yes, we hear you.
I'm Masaki Muto. This question and this issue has a common issue for us. We try to make electric submission system using BIM now. So Franco introduced our situation. So we try to make the system by 2023 financial year. So our goal is this slide indicated such like the document and data system type. We call step 2 plus. It's a hybrid system defined by BSI Establishing Common Guide, advanced BIM level. So we now have some problems about that. Some technical issues. So we can we can make a confirmation using a modeling view. Is a very big issue for achievement of the hybrid system. Especially is it that we have some problems about designer's expression intention of building confirmation is can expressed by this model view. It's a it's substitute for the paper drawings. it's a quite big issue for technical issue and also an institution issue. So and we don't have think about fear of open beam complexity. It's very easy to achieve or adapt open beam for our systems. It is using something like the software native system is very complexity in Japan. So we have to make open beam styles. That's all.
Thank you. Yes. Well, I think the one of the key points about the open standards and the IFC is that it is a vehicle for trust in the sense that everyone can access the information in lots of different ways, and that there's a growing market or community of viewers and reporters and so on, so that there are lots of ways of using the information. And I think that builds a trust that there is a direct connection between the material. One of the challenges which has been reported is the idea that there must be drawings because there must be a seal attached and a signature. And I'd highlight one very interesting approach that is being developed in Korea, which is to check the BIM model, the IFC BIM model, using a lot of advanced technology and programming. And then if they are passed, if the building passes, then the regulator generates the drawings so that they can be stamped and approved. And so they have a tool called Drawing Generator, which incorporates the Korean drawing standards and allows the process to proceed and still comply with the legal expectations, which does indeed involve seals and signatures and so on. So I think that's a sophisticated answer. And actually, it takes BIM back to its original conception from the 1970s and 80s, which is that drawings should be generated from the BIM without human intervention. Something that's perhaps been lost in this century. Yeah.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Masaki, also. And then there's one final comment that we haven't yet got to, which is from Raina. Shall I read that out, Nick, and then perhaps you or Franco can respond?
Yeah, if you could call it out.
It's not a direct question, but I'm sure you'll have something to add to it. So Raina says, if we look at our public administration here in Germany, a lot has to be changed in order to react efficiently and pragmatically to the challenges ahead. The renovation of the infrastructure, the buildings, etc., to save CO2 must proceed faster than before as targets for 2030 to 2040 to be achieved. Therefore, digitization needs to be pushed. This means that the regulatory framework has to be defined, and BIM should be a good step forward in this direction. So the points of completeness, consistency, etc., in the planning, constructing, and maintenance process should be clarified for all stakeholders.
Yes, I think there are some external factors that will accelerate this process. I think although the possibility that BIM would have a role in both in monitoring or measuring embedded carbon, committed carbon, and also the carbon in use has been around for a while, I think that the governments are showing a renewed interest with these 2030 targets that are becoming increasingly common. And so that's a dimension where rigor is needed, because an otherwise sustainable building can be undermined by one or two small aspects of it. So you need to take a comprehensive approach to the assessment. So that's one major factor. In the UK, we also have some urgency around life safety following that horrible fire, and the idea is that the building owner will be responsible for managing and maintaining a consistent set of information throughout the life cycle, not just at the point when the building is sold or transferred, but at every moment. And that too will encourage the adoption of BIM and information management in that sector. So there are these pressures coming in, which suggest that some aspects of the regulatory system are going to need information in a systematic way, for energy modeling, for so on. And of course, as that potential emerges, clients will become more interested in the opportunities for cost and time control and so on. So I think the clarification is an important part of it. And I'd like to announce or just take a quick digression to mention that the regulatory room is about to launch a regulatory information requirements project, where we would like to bring together from across the world the information requirements that go into regulatory approval. Now, we know very well that different countries have different legislation and different rules applied to that information. But where there is commonality, we think that it would be useful for buildingSMART to include those information requirements in the IFC standard, which becomes an ISO standard. So we are looking for people with a broad understanding of the regulatory environments in their countries to come forward and take a share, a financial as well as a technical share in the project. So that may be one area which where we can actually get this clarification underway. Okay.
Oh, if I may, I think Rainer is also thinking to the EU renewal wave that was published by the EU Parliament, and I know that this is creating a great movement in all countries. Not a great movement, some movements in all countries belonging to EU. But of course, different governments are doing differently. I know by chance that there are also some very good projects in the Horizon 2027 now, because to support this change. So I can't say that everything is done, but I think we can say that something is moving, not so fast or not fast enough. This is the main question, I think.
Yeah,
that's it.
Good.
There is another question about how to overcome reluctance. Would you say something, Nick? Have you seen this?
Yeah, the question is about. It says it's vital that it is fully implemented by major software vendors. Now, naming a few: Bentley, AutoCAD, Autodesk, I imagine, Esri, etc. Now, there's a part of the benefits of interoperability is that we can draw a distinction between those tools used for developing a BIM model or authoring it and those that we use to analyze and inspect it. Those companies are very much invested in the development of information rather than its analysis. But the questioner then says that they're not likely to implement anything that requires specialized software from a newer company. I think the whole point of IFC is to break that dependency and say those developing schemes, whether in building or in infrastructure, can use whatever tools they like, and the regulatory community can respond as long as it's delivered in an open format like IFC. I think the strength of the IFC is that as a standard, it's been around for, I think I said 25 years. And in that time, it has been remarkably stable. It's had perhaps 4 major releases, and they have a degree of backwards and forwards compatibility or whatever it is. So the new system is whatever system is needed to do the job of the regulator, and that can be maintained. So I think we are working really hard to cut that knot that Ryan is talking about. Yes, so your third point that the vendor's implementation will have to be comprehensive and interoperable is absolutely to the point. We absolutely want to avoid a situation where governments are picking software vendors' solutions. Most government agencies, I'd say all government agencies, are extremely reluctant to do that. The whole point of Open BIM is to say that the regulators can use any system they like, but the information will always be provided in the Open BIM standard, which is a long-lasting standard. In fact, the IFC standard was developed with the idea that even if you have no software, there are 5 foundational files, and if you have those files, you can automatically generate software to read it. Now, that was introduced so as to ensure that information about nuclear installations would have a 200 to 400 year lifespan. So we are addressing that. I'm pretty sure that everything that Ryan is asking for the answer is Open BIM, and the open standards that the community is offering. Okay. And
just if I may, just to say something to add to your explanation. I think that one of the things that is going to change the game is probably the answer for data and more than for documents from institutions. As you said, the case of fire regulations in England, in UK are changing a lot of the approach. And I think that also the environmental requirements that are required in the next generation Europe, in Europe, are absolutely changing the game, because interest is moving from documents to data. And in this case, the only standard that is available is Open BIM. And actually, so this, I think, should is in my opinion, something that will really help the improvement and the fostering the use of it in every single organization. Otherwise, of course, commercial standards are not available, are not usable in the same way. Also because we don't have a real unique leader in this technology. Fortunately, let me add this. I'm very happy about this.
Okay. Well, I hope that's answered some of the questions that have been raised. I think we'd like to tell you a little bit more about what we're trying to do. I've mentioned the Regulatory Information Requirements Project, and the way to get involved with that is to get involved with your local chapter of buildingSMART. You can contact us directly, but and to engage that way. One of the lessons we learned from the survey was that the benefit of translating it out of English into several other languages. Franco, remind me which they were?
It was Spanish, Italian, German, and Japanese.
Yeah. Now, that considerably expanded the reach of the survey, because although we're an international organization, the key to what we do is to find those areas of consensus among different cultures and disciplines. And so that was a major part, and we want to engage with the buildingSMART's chapters about the regulatory room, and to make sure that they are aware of the opportunities we're finding. We also want to support national open BIM champions to convince stakeholders. So that's you. You know, we're looking for people to step forward to say that they would like to work on this. You don't have to be in a leadership position or a decision-making position, but just to agitate, to promote the ideas, to share demonstrations. The regulatory room has quite an extensive collection now of examples from around the world and give access to that. So we hope that you will all think of yourselves as open BIM champions and keep in touch with us. So there is a challenge in getting messages to regulatory bodies to take up the opportunities, and they're more likely to listen to their local community than to necessarily to engage in big initiatives like the buildingSMART standards conferences that happen every 6 months. So we're looking for ways to get into them and help them understand what the choices are. Yes, we want to work on our messages, and your feedback is interesting, and so on. So I think you know, if any of those things resonate or are interesting to you, I hope you will consider getting involved. I'd like to say that if you, sorry about the color. If you want to talk to us or share your challenges in more detail, then contact@buildingsmart.org is the best way of reaching us. There is also a forum which called forums.buildingsmart.org, and there is a regulatory room forum there. And that is an opportunity to make comments and suggestions and get feedback from the rest of the community. But I'd also like to suggest that you need to challenge your boss or your customers or your regulators, and just sow the seeds that there is something that needs to be done. And to help you do that, we would say, what do you need to help you make that argument? Does that trigger any responses or any thoughts? Anything extra in the chat? Anything extra you'd add, Franco?
No, I think just I'm just doing some marketing. Say we are. It's a lot of fun to collaborate with
It is,
with
yes.
regulatory rooms, and we are good. We are good people, and we have a lot of fun together. So please join us.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, so I think the chat has gone quiet. I think maybe at the hour point we lost a few, but oh, here we go. So one more message. Let me just catch up. Okay, so let's conclude. I'd like to thank you for attending, for the comments, but the next steps are with you guys to decide what's needed, and how you want to get involved. And so we very much hope to hear from you sooner rather than later. The presentation will be available in a week or so through buildingSMART. Okay. Dan, can you say anything about how the presentation will be available?
We haven't decided yet where we're going to host it. I'm sure it will be hosted on our Vimeo channel. So if you follow us on Vimeo, you'll be able to see it there directly. And then I expect we will post the link to that, the Vimeo from the regulatory room itself.
Yes. So the regulatory room has a web page on the buildingSMART.org site, and it'll be we'll connect through that, and we'll also put it into the forum, forums.buildingsmart.org, which is a.
We also have a list, obviously, of everyone that registered to attend today, so perhaps we can email that list once it's available.
Okay.
That would be good. Excellent. Okay, so think just to thank Franco and Dan for their support in putting this together.
Thank you, Nick.
And thank all the contributors, especially our steering committee, but all of you, and hope to hear from you soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick.
Good afternoon.
Thanks, Franco. Allow me to say thank you to the audience as well for attending today. The email address is obviously still there on the screen, contact@buildingsmart.org if you have any follow-ups. Otherwise, we hope to see you in another buildingSMART webinar very soon. Thank you and goodbye.